Hello everyone, this is Swati Shastri taking a session on computer networks and security. So before continuing with our today's lecture, that is lecture number 6, let us have just a recap of what did we do in the last class. In the previous class, we actually have studied about electronic mail in the internet, that is how to send an electronic mail from one sender to a particular receiver. So we have studied that you can send an electronic mail to someone using a protocol that is called as SMTP, that is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And this Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, we have also compared it with HTTP. So when you have learnt SMTP, that is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, this is actually acting between mail servers. There are two mail servers whenever you are sending an electronic mail. So one mail server acts like a sender and one more mail server acts like a receiver. The mail server who is sending it, we consider that thing as client, and the mail server who is receiving it, we consider it as server. Okay. So SMTP is always a push protocol. We just did a slight comparison of SMTP with HTTP. So when HTTP is considered, HTTP is a pull protocol. It is going to pull some data. Rather, SMTP is going to push some data. And the only difference between the SMTP and HTTP is that SMTP always uses 7-bit ASCII code. Rather, HTTP is always using messages to transfer the data from one place to another. Correct? Now our question is, we can push our data right from the sender's mail box to the receiver's mailbox. But receiver's responsibility is to fetch that contents from the mailbox. So what is that to be done over there? That is what we are going to deal with today. So today's topic is that we are going to cover about the electronic mail itself, but we are going to say what should be the mail message format, and we are going to study about what is mail access protocols. That is, how are we going to access the mail? The point is, when we create a mail, that is compose a mail and send it to someone, it goes to the receiver's mailbox and it drops there. But receiver as an agent should visit that mailbox, extract that and then study it. Correct? So to do that extraction, you will be making use of mail access protocols. Apart from these two kinds of format as well as a protocol that we are learning, apart from that, we are also going to start what is the meaning of DNS. Okay, so we'll just have a brief introduction about what is DNS as well. So let us start with the electronic mail in the internet. What should be its format? So this is what the mail message format must be. If you consider any mail message, it is usually having a header as well as a body. So it is most common thing. You have mailed it to someone, like you have often mailed one or the other person. So when you have mailed, it will be always having header and body. Body is the contents where you write all the components. In between header and body, you always have a blank line so that you can differentiate between header and body. When you consider header, header will be composed of three contents. First is to, second is from, and third is subject. So to watch well, if you just go to Gmail and say that you want to compose a mail, that time it will obviously opt you for, or it will give you three headers, that is to, from as well as subject. After filling this itself, your body will be accepted and you can send some mails to anybody. So if you want to have a detailed discussion on that, we can visit RFC 822 to have standard text for message formats. You can study over there. So this is how a message format must be for any SMTP or any mail that is getting transferred. Remember, these things are purely working in application layer itself, and no other layers are using it. But being SMTP in the application layer, it will always invoke TCP in the transport layer. Now the question comes is, if you just concentrate on the diagram, you can see that this is Alice who wants to forward a mail to Bob. Okay, so what she will do is she will push a mail from her user agent to the sender's mail server, that is her mail server. Consider that she is using Gmail and he is using Yahoo Mail. Okay, so she being using a Gmail, she will push her mail to Gmail server. So because she wants to send it, it will be placed in the outgoing box. Using SMTP, it will pick the mail from the outgoing box and push it to the receiver's mail server, which is Yahoo Mail server. Okay, and Yahoo Mail server, the moment it receives, it will keep it in the inbox of the Bob. So it is never present in the user machine. So whenever you access Gmail, only then you get that mail, correct? Otherwise your machine is not getting the mail. If until and unless you have not logged into your Gmail, you will never get it. So where you have logged in onto his server, onto the mail server. So all your inbox messages are actually stored in the mail servers. Now if user agent, that is Bob, wants to access this mail, he requires something called as access protocols. That is what we are going to study today. So from here, when the mail moves from the mail server to the Bob, or who is the receiver, to them, for that you require something called as access protocols. SMTP is simply going to deliver and store your mails into the receiver's mail server. It is not going to do further parts. So if you want to retrieve your mails from your server, you should have access protocols. And there are three kinds of access protocols, that is POP, IMAP and HTTP. POP stands for Post Office Protocol. If you are interested, you can have a detailed study at RFC 1939. And IMAP stands for Internet Mail Access Protocol. HTTP, as usual that you know, it is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So let us study these protocols one by one, that is POP, IMAP and HTTP. When you consider POP, you have a version of POP, and that version of POP that is used is POP3. You are using POP3, that is Post Office Protocol version 3. Okay, so this protocol was utilized first to send or retrieve or access your mails. So this protocol always was running on two phases. One was authorization phase and second one was transaction phase. So what is the meaning of authorization phase? As the word says, it authorizes something. It is going to authorize someone, or it is going to authenticate someone. That is, who must be someone? The someone must be always client. So who is going to authorize client? Server is always going to authorize the client. So client is sending information in terms of commands to the server, and server will respond back to the client. Okay, so client is always sending certain information in form of commands or requests in form of commands. Rather, server will respond back to the client's commands using responses. So in authorization phase, client will be using only two kinds of commands. First command is user command. So user command is going to declare the name of the user, and second command that client can always make use of is pass command, that is password. So for username and password that is being sent by the client to the server, server can respond in two ways. One, it can respond okay if the username and passwords are correct, or it may respond with error if any problem is there, or if password or username is incorrect. So to learn this, we'll see a small example over here. You have client, that is C representation. This represents client and S represents server. So client is asking a telnet mail server to have a connection. So telnet is working on 110. So you have a connection. After that, server tells it is okay to have a connection as a POP3 and it is all ready to access it. Next, C, that is client, sends user, that is this particular command, user, and it sends the name, that is Bob. Okay, whatever username you have, that username will be sent. So user space Bob. When this particular command reaches the server, server is going to send okay, because server has an entry for Bob. He's a person who belongs to that particular server. That's why he has to that's why the server is replying you okay. The moment server replies you or responds your client with okay, client will send password. And password, what is the password? That is hungry is the password. So the moment client sends password as hungry to the server and server receives that, it will tell you okay, user successfully logged on. So this is what is happening in your Gmail also. You first click on gmail.com, then it asks you for username, you enter your email ID, then you press enter, then it asks for password, and then you have your inbox or your mailbox completely open. So that is what is called as authorization phase in POP3 as well. So after authorization phase, it enters the moment you are into your mailbox. If you have successfully opened your mailbox with the username and correct username and password that you have, it will enter into transaction phase. So in transaction phase, very many commands are being sent from the client to the server. So client can first send a command called as list. It may send, it is not a compulsion that it has to send, it may send a command called as list. What is list? It is asking to list all the possible emails that is received by that particular user agent. So whatever emails are received, it has to list it. If the client sends retrieve, so the retrieve RETR response retrieve. So when retrieve command is being sent from the client to server, it means that it is trying to retrieve the message by that particular number. Similarly, you have delete. Delete is going to delete that particular mail or delete that particular mail. Finally, you can have quit. Quit is like you want to stop doing whatever you want to do and you want to just log out. Correct? So we'll see an example so that we can understand better. Remember, all these list of commands that you have learned, this is sent from client to the server. None of them are sent from server to the client. That is not possible. So consider here, when they log in, you can see the second part of your of the code. So C is representing client. Client asks to list. List whom? It is asking to list certain mails that belongs to this particular client, that is your Bob in this example. It is asking you to list all the mails that are present in the server's mailbox regarding Bob. So what is server doing at every entry? So he has an 3 entries. So server is listing saying that there is first mail which is of 498 bytes. There is second mail of 912 bytes. So on until and unless last one. So your carriage return and line feed is always given by a dot mark, correct? So the moment there is a dot mark, client gets to know that this is the particular list. Now consider that client wants to access your first mail. So what client will tell or send? So client is going to send retrieve RETR1. So when a client sends retrieve 1, it means that your first email must be drawn or sent from the server to the client. The message from the first email must be sent. So server, what it is doing, it is sending message 1 contents. So it will send the complete contents, and to show the end of the contents, it is using carriage return and line feed, which is dot mark. So dot mark always represents carriage return, that is CR, and LF, that is line feed. So after doing that, client asks to delete 1. So once client tells DELE1, that is delete 1, server will delete the first mail. Next, client is asking to retrieve 2. So when client asks to retrieve 2, then server sends the message of second message contents and ends it with a dot mark. Then client asks it to delete 2. So once these two mails are being read by the client wants to log out. So client is sending quit. So server is responding with plus OK. So this is a small example of how POP3 works. So first thing is authorization phase and second thing is transaction phase. So now when you consider your POP3, the previous example that you learned, this is like download and delete. What you have done, you have retrieved the message. After retrieving the message, you are trying to delete that message. So this kind of mode of operation is called as download and delete. So there can be one more kind of operation under POP3 and that is called as download and keep. After downloading, you do not delete it, you keep that message as it is and you go for the next message. But POP3 is always stateless across all the sessions. So this is how POP3 works. Now POP3 has certain problem, that is you have so many commands that are to be used and so many responses that you get from the server. So it is not so GUI friendly. Now what came the replacement for it? The replacement for it was IMAP. Now was this IMAP different from your POP3? No, it was almost all or completely same as that of your POP3. So whatever messages were there, those messages were never deleted, they were all kept as it is. But the only add-on that IMAP had was it was allowing users to create folders and save their messages in that particular folder. The difference was that IMAP was allowing for the user to create folders and keep all their mails or messages organized in the folder. IMAP also keeps user state across the session. Whatever sessions were there, across that session, all the states was being maintained, especially the names of folders, the mappings between the message IDs and the folder names, all those contents were kept as it is. So this was the only improvement that was being made in IMAP. But when we were interested in having a graphical user interface, we moved on to something called as HTTP. So usually more and more users today that we are using for sending and accessing their mail is via a web browser, correct? So we just make use of something called as http://www.gmail.com. So this is what is our habit that we have. So that is the reason that to access as well as push the mails, we started making use of HTTP, and SMTP remained only in between two mail servers, and POP3 and IMAP had to eliminate. So POP3, if you want to have an aliasing of your addresses and all, POP3 is still till date used in your Gmail as a backend for some reasons and all. So basic use of your HTTP that is done is at Hotmail. These were the people, Hotmail were the people who actually started accessing the mails via HTTP rather than POP3 or IMAP. So HTTP has become a popular thing in accessing any of the protocols, and we call it as browsing as usual. So this is how your SMTP works. So when you consider SMTP, you have three components: a mail server, a user agent, and an SMTP. SMTP was actually acting between mail servers. Mail servers are the servers which are going to serve the sending side as well as the receiving side. So mail servers on the sender side becomes a client. Mail server on the receiver side becomes a server. The mail server on the sender side places your mails in the outgoing box. The mail server on the receiving side, when he receives a mail, he keeps it in the mailbox of a certain receiver. So from the receiver, if you want to receive Then you have to make use of mail access protocols, and you have learned three kinds of protocols, that is POP3, IMAP as well as HTTP. Okay, so now let us go to the next part of today's lecture, and that is called as DNS. So what does DNS stand for? DNS stands for Domain Name System. So why to learn this DNS? What is the use of learning this DNS? Now when we consider people, how are you going to identify people? People are identified by their names or their passport numbers as well, right? So almost all of you have your own Aadhaar card number, right? Whether people call you by the number that you have on the Aadhaar card or your name, definitely by name and not on the number, correct? So, but both are meant for identification. But when you consider hosts or routers, what is meant for identification for them? Their identification is IP address, that is IPv4, which is 32-bit long, correct? So if you want to remember Google server, you actually have to remember his IP address. Now whether we can remember all the IP addresses, like if I try to address people by their Aadhaar card number, then I may make lots of mistakes in spelling out the number, one, and people may not be remembering what is that particular Aadhaar card number of that particular person. That is also not possible. So basically, we being human beings can remember names, but we cannot remember names. Now, if I want to contact google.com, instead of knowing google.com, if I know the IP address of him, can I remember the IP address of all the different routers that I'm interested in visiting? Not possible. So what we did was, that particular IP address was being mapped to a specific name. That name is called as domain name. That name is called as domain name. Now the risk here was, we had to map a correct IP address and a name at a proper justification, such that if I give that name, that specific IP address only has to come up and no other things should come up. So that mapping risk started on us. Now this mapping risk is being dealt by DNS, that is called as Domain Name System. So what is DNS doing? There are lots of servers who are going to maintain this domain name, which is going to have an equivalent IP address. So this particular domain name system is a distributed database which is going to maintain ample amount of name servers. That is, there are lots of servers, they are called as name servers. Why? Because they maintain names of respective IP addresses. So if that server is provided with a specific name, that particular server will return you a specific IP address. So whenever I type google.com, that google.com is being given to a name server by your browser, and that name server will return IP address to your browser. Why we do that? Because every machine's identification is given by the IP address and not the names. Because machines cannot understand names, machine can understand only numbers, and whatever these kind of conversions are occurring, they are occurring in the application layer. And this particular domain name system is an application layer protocol itself. So because this is an application layer protocol, it will be running on hosts. It can run on certain amount of routers on the name servers, so that it can communicate to resolve those names. So it has certain complexity at the network edges, but it can be managed. Now considering this, we will learn the working of your domain name system later, but what is the service that a domain name system is always giving you? So domain name system gives you the first kind of services, the host name to IP address translation. The conversion of host name to IP address is called as translation. So we try to translate a name to an IP address using DNS. So this is the first service that is being given by any domain name system. Second is it can give host aliasing. That is, if I have a web browser or a web server named as some xyz.com, at the same time I can have the same server with the name as lmn.com. So if the user types xyz.com, it should by default redirect itself to lmn.com. So that is called as host aliasing, or we can call it as canonical naming. So if you are making use of canonical naming, that is same kind of a site is having two kinds of addresses. If you want to maintain that thing can be done by DNS systems. So DNS system also can provide mail server aliasing. The best example is Yahoo. So Yahoo people started with the mail servers wherein they had their email IDs with the extension of yahoo.com. So after some time they changed their server to yahoomail.com. After that they went on to become ymail.com. All three are mail servers working under Yahoo, which is having same services. So that is called as mail server aliasing. So this is also a kind of a service that is being provided by DNS. There is one more kind of a service that DNS provides, and that is called as load distribution. So whatever replicate web servers are there, if you have a set of IP addresses for more than one canonical names, that thing can be maintained by your DNS services. So these are the kinds of services that DNS is going to provide. So to summarize what we have learned today, we have learned about mail access format, that is it should have header format and a body in the whole mail. So header is comprised of to, from as well as subject. So SMTP was used to send a mail from sender's mail server to the receiver's mail server. But when it comes to the receiver's mail server, the user agent who has actually received the mail, if he wants to access it from the mail server, he has to make use of mail access protocols. We have learned three kinds of protocols, that is POP3, IMAP and HTTP. After that, we have started with a new system that is called as domain name system, and we have learned that it can provide four kinds of services. The services are conversion of host name to IP address, host aliasing, mail server aliasing, as well as load distribution. So this is what we have covered today. In the next class, we'll see how this DNS system works. Okay. Thank you.